Take that which is the three modes. It follows is not the definition of correct sign.
Why?
Because if it is a correct sign, it doesn't have to be three modes. It follows it has to be the three modes.
Except.
Take that which is two modes. It follows it's not the definition of correct sign. It follows it is the definition of correct sign. Because it fulfills the definition of correct sign. Right, you can't. Because it is a triply qualified imputed existent of substantial existent of correct sign. Is it a triply qualified substantial existent of correct sign? Because in general it is a definition of correct sign. It is established in relation to correct sign, which is its definiendo, and it doesn't act as the definition of anything other than correct sign. Which one? I said three. Yours is just the three modes we said, no? So just try and make sense of the why there's this thing going on. I think it's helpful.
Can you repeat this again?
Take that which is the two modes. It follows it is the definition of correct sign. Yeah?
Why?
Because if it is a correct sign, it follows it is that which is the two modes. If it is that which is the two modes, it follows it is a correct sign. And they are established in the relation of definition and definiendo. Are they the eight laws of pervasion?
No.
If it is a correct sign, it follows it is the two modes.
Why?
For example. What really? That one or you want to choose? Okay. For example.
No, the third one. They don't have the relation of definition and definiendo.
It follows they have the relation of definition and definiendo.
Why?
Because to know a correct sign, you have to know the two modes, and the two modes completely, entirely, without anything lacking, without anything extra, manage to illustrate the meaning of correct sign. What mode do you need to illustrate?
Because you need the third mode.
It follows you don't need the third mode.
You do.
It follows you don't need the third mode because with the two modes you can. Because with the two modes, then you are a heretic also. It follows you don't need the two. You don't need the third mode because only with two modes you can generate inference.
Reason is understood.
It follows only with two modes you cannot generate inference.
Agreed.
It follows only with the property of the subject and the forward pervasion you cannot generate inference.
Agreed.
Except it follows that to know that sound is impermanent with the sign product, it's not enough to have the property of the subject and the forward pervasion in the proof that sound is impermanent with the sign product. Agree? All of you agree? You're all agreeing? Yeah? Okay. Take a person who has realized that sound is impermanent with the sign. No, that has realized the sign product in the proof that sound is impermanent, and for whom product is the property of the subject and the forward pervasion. It follows that they know whatever is produced has to be impermanent.
Except.
It follows they have ascertained this on a correct concordant example.
Agreed.
So it follows for them, it has become the second mode. It follows they have ascertained product to be. They have ascertained on a correct concordant example.
Yes.
It follows that they have ascertained product to be only existent on sound in accordance with the modal statement.
On sound.
Where on sound, yeah. Product on sound, property of the subject.
Okay,
Yeah.
I want to rewind and say why for the correct concordant example.
It follows they haven't realized on a correct concordant example. It follows that now someone for whom it has become the second mode.
Why?
Follows it is for someone for whom it has become the second mode.
Except.
It follows there is someone for whom there is a correct concordant example.
Except.
It follows that there is a correct concordant example. It has been ascertained to be existing only in the concordant class. And it follows that they have ascertained it to be existent on sound in accordance with the modal statement and only on sound, that whole only thing. And there is a flawless subject.
Agreed.
Agree? It follows that by this it's not sufficient for them to generate inference that sound is impermanent. It follows it is sufficient for them to generate that sound is inference that sound is impermanent. Because when they realize that sound is produced, they can remember the pervasion that whatever is produced has to be impermanent on sound.
No pervasion.
It follows that they can do this though.
Yeah.
It follows that when they recall the pervasion that whatever is product produced has to be impermanent on the basis sound, they have to realize that sound is both produced and impermanent.
You do it on the basis
Again is written over here. So then, if one implicitly leads to the other, why is the definition of correct sign the three modes? Why not just the two modes? And then Gen says, even in India, many scholars or many masters have debated this by saying there is no requirement for a third mode. However, Dharmakirti says there are three modes. So you, since you have to follow Dharmakirti to the letter, now need to make sense of this. So, what is it? Take someone who only does this. It follows that they can recollect the pervasion of whatever is produced as impermanent on the sound, on the subject sound.
Why?
Follows they can't.
Yeah.
It follows that they have realized it on the correct concordant example. It follows they have realized that there is no common locus between product and permanent.
They haven't.
Why?
It follows they haven't realized that product exists only in the concordant class.
They have realized it exists.
Why?
Because they realize the forward pervasion.
I mean, they have
Realize the forward pervasion.
the forward
No,
pervasion.
they haven't realized that it exists only in the
It follows they haven't realized the forward pervasion.
They have.
It follows they have realized the forward pervasion. It follows that they realize that there is no common locus between product and permanent.
To do that, they realize.
Just answer the question.
Why?
They haven't realized this.
Okay, sorry, they have.
They have realized this.
Yes.
They haven't.
They have.
It follows they haven't realized the forward pervasion.
Why?
It follows they have realized the forward pervasion. Yes?
They haven't realized that there is no common locus between.
They haven't realized that product exists only in impermanent.
Why?
It follows they have realized that product exists only in impermanent.
Yeah, they've not.
Except.
They've not realized.
They've not.
It follows they haven't realized the forward pervasion.
Why?
What's the definition of forward pervasion?
For the person for whom it's the
Yeah.
second mode.
Yeah. What does that person have to realize? It exists
It
only in the
exists
concordant
only-
class.
Only in the concordant class. They have to. They have to recognize it only in the concordant class.
Have they recognized
But
it
they
only?
don't
One
have
second.
to rec-
Have they recognized it only in the concordant class?
This yes.
Have they recognized
Yeah.
it to be existing only in impermanent?
Why?
What is the concordant class?
Impermanent.
It follows they realize it to be only in the concordant class
Why?
because they realize the forward pervasion.
No pervasion.
What's the definition of forward pervasion?
For someone,
What's the definition of forward pervasion in the
For
proof that sound
someone-
is impermanent with the sign product?
for someone, yeah, help me with the English.
Ta detungi tucho konala yoba ni dungi dra.
No.
Ta tungi
Tucho
pasong
konala
kasi
yoba
tucho
ni
konala yoba nyepa. Mareve. Onto nyere. They've ascertained this. They've ascertained it. So they've ascertained it to be existing only in the concordant class and permanent.
Why?
What is the concordant class?
Impermanent.
Have they realized it to be existent only in the concordant class?
They have only
No,
recognized
no,
it
no.
in
Have they
the
realized it to be existent only in the concordant class?
No.
Tuncho konala yoba nye tha.
No.
What is that in English?
In English, that would be they have only recognized it in the concordant class.
The only is after. Tuncho konala yoba nyeba. Only in the concordant class.
Yeah, they've recognized it only in the concordant
Yeah,
class.
so they recognize it only in the concordant class.
Accept.
If you recognize it is in the concordant class, do you have to recognize it is only in the concordant class?
Why?
You don't have to.
No.
So if you recognize that it exists in impermanent, you don't have to recognize it exists only in impermanent.
Accept.
So what is the extra that you have to recognize to that know that it exists only in impermanent?
That it does not exist in the
Take someone for whom it has become the forward pervasion. It follows they recognize that it exists only in impermanent.
Come again?
Take someone for whom it has become the forward provision. It follows they've recognized it exists only in impermanent.
It exists only in. Why?
You said in the forward
They-
provision.
They only recognize it as existent in the concordant class.
Is that enough to recognize a forward provision?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
To know that sound and impermanent have a common locus is enough to know that it is the forward provision? Come. Seriously, why do you need to do this whole hang up with the third and the why? That's the one. Is that clear? Yeah? It's not clear. I mean, it's not very obvious why it's needed. Where you're making a mistake, I feel, is that you are saying, one sec, take someone who realizes the forward provision in the proof that sound is impermanent with the signed product. It follows they simultaneously have to realize the counter provision in the proof that sound is impermanent. So you can't. Why? Why? Is that why really? Why? Take product in the proof that sound is impermanent. It follows when you realize the forward provision, you don't have to realize the counter provision simultaneously. Agree? And if you realize the counter provision, you don't have to realize the forward provision simultaneously. Take someone for whom sound product has become the forward provision in the proof that sound is impermanent. It follows for this person, it is not yet the counter provision in the proof that sound is impermanent. It follows it is the counter provision in the proof that sound is impermanent. Because it is ascertained, because product is that which is ascertained to be non-existent, to be only non-existent in the discordant class for someone for whom it is the third mode. It follows which part?
Third mode.
It follows there is not someone for whom it has become the third mode. This person, the person who has only ascertained according to you, there is a moment when there's only the forward provision, but not the counter provision. In that moment, it follows that they have not ascertained. In that moment that they are not someone for whom it is the third mode. It follows they are someone for whom it is the third mode because they have ascertained it on a correct discordant example. It follows they haven't ascertained it on a correct discordant example. It follows they have ascertained it on a correct discordant example because they have realized the lack of common locus between permanent and produced.
But the definition for discordant counter provision is it's not existent in all the discordant classes.
That's the definition, yeah.
Yeah, but implicitly they realize that it's not
Existent
existent
in any of the discordant classes.
not impermanent, but they haven't ascertained that it doesn't exist in all the discordant classes.
They haven't ascertained that it doesn't exist in all the discordant classes.
That is not implicit.
They haven't realized that it doesn't exist only in the concordant class.
They have.
They haven't
Why?
because they haven't removed doubt with respect to it being in some discordant classes.
New probation.
It follows to know that it exists only in impermanent. They don't have to remove the doubt that there is no common locus between permanent and produced.
Why?
It follows they need to have removed that doubt.
Agreed.
It follows they've realized that it doesn't exist in any of the discordant classes
Why?
because they have removed the doubt that there could be a common locus between permanent and produced.
New probation.
Once I take the person who has removed the doubt that there is a common locus between permanent and produced, it follows they can have doubt that there is product does exist in some discordant class permanent.
Some discordant class which could be object of knowledge. Remember other discordant classes. There are three.
Oh, very nice. Fine. Then take product. It follows it is not the forward provision in the proof that sound is impermanent
Why?
because it exists in the discordant class. Yours is an earlier doubt, but if it's not removed, then let's go. It follows it exists in the discordant class.
If they haven't.
Just answer the question. It follows it exists in the discordant class.
Agreed.
It follows it's not the forward provision in the proof that sound is impermanent
Why?
because it doesn't exist only in the concordant class.
No probation.
Yeah, it exists in the discordant class and it is only in the concordant class.
Yeah, because object of knowledge
What?
would be one such.
Can it be both? Exist in the discordant class and also exist only in the concordant class? I only have 10 rupees but I have 100 rupees. Can you say something like that? You can't, right? Yeah, so it can't exist only in the concordant class while also existing in the discordant class. Therefore, to know that it exists only in the concordant class, you have to remove doubt that it doesn't exist in the discordant class. Can you still have a doubt that it exists in the discordant class?
Why?
It follows that if you realize a forward provision, you have to have removed the doubt that there is a common locus between product and permanent. Okay? Back to us, our earlier one. Come back to it. So, take someone, you were the one. Take this person, it follows they have realized it on a correct discordant example.
Right.
Because they have realized the lack of common locus between permanent and produced.
No probation.
It follows that they have realized the lack of common locus between permanent and produced. It follows that they have realized it on a permanent phenomenon.
Why?
What have they realized?
They realize the game is
What have,
on an impermanent.
it follows that they have realized it implicitly on an impermanent phenomenon.
Yes.
It follows when you realize that there is no common locus between product and impermanent. Good, this is, now there's a very good debate that gets which is done. I want to do this with you now. Okay, answer this. If you realize that product is related to impermanent, it follows you have to implicitly realize that permanent is related to non-product. Let him see.
Why?
It follows you have to realize this because you have to realize that permanent and non-product do not have a common locus implicitly.
No probation.
It follows when you have to realize this though.
Yeah.
Take the valid cognizer that knows that permanent and product don't have a common locus. It follows it doesn't realize that permanent is related to non-product.
You think about the non-existence.
I don't know anything but the four
That's
responses.
nothing.
It doesn't have to know that.
No, but then it's even worse. They have to know. They have to know.
Take someone who knows that product is related to impermanent. It follows they implicitly know that permanent is related to non-product.
Let's just say agree. I'm going to hear it.
It follows that by the power of counteracting permanent, product is counteracted is not the definition of product being related to impermanent.
Why?
It follows that by the power of counteracting, it is different from permanent, and by the power of counteracting permanent, it is counteracted is not the definition of being related to impermanent. Impermanent, sorry, my bad. It is different from impermanent, and by the power of counteracting impermanent, it is counteracted. Is this the definition of related to impermanent? It follows that to realize the definiendum on a basis, you have to know the definition before.
Agree.
Follows you don't have to know it before,
Why?
because it happens at the same time.
Reason was
It
that.
follows happens at the same time because one is explicit and the other is implicit.
Reason was that.
The reason is established because it is the intention of our very wise and venerable Henrik. That's what you've been saying the whole time. One is implicit, one is explicit.
I haven't said this.
Yeah, I don't think he said that.
Thank you, Smart.
When you realize that product is related to impermanent, you implicitly realize that permanent is related to non-product. Has he said this?
Yeah.
When you realize that permanent is related to non-product, it follows you realize that product is related to impermanent implicitly. When you realize the definition of product being related to impermanent, you realize the definiendum product related to impermanent.
The definition of
Of product being related to impermanent. It follows you also realize the definiendum.
the definiendum.
Because you realize that product is related to impermanent. You haven't said it explicitly, but it's implicit in your position.
Please think it out so it fixes this manifest completely.
So take the valid cognizer that realizes that by the power of counteracting impermanent, product is counteracted. It follows it is the valid cognizer that realizes that permanent is related to non-product.
Okay.
It follows it realizes the definition of permanent being related to non-product. It follows it realizes that product, by the power of counteracting product, impermanent is counteracted. It follows it realizes the definiendum of product being related to impermanent.
The definition.
Yeah,
Why?
because it realizes that product is related to impermanent. Yeah. So here, the point is, so where you have to get unstuck and I'll give you the 4 things that are mutually inclusive, then we'll stop, okay? Then after this is the end of the 3 modes, at least for now, okay? Don't write anything yet. The issue is, on the one hand, you are saying that when you realize the forward pervasion, you implicitly realize the counter pervasion. And if you explicitly realize the counter pervasion, you implicitly realize the forward pervasion. So you're really not being given any freedom to say one comes before the other. Right?
Yeah.
That's one thing that you have to contend with. The other thing that you have to also simultaneously say, therefore, is that whatever reasoning you do to come to know the forward pervasion simultaneously leads you to know the counter pervasion. Correct? Because if the realization of both is simultaneous, then what you do for this side makes both happen. So now the issue is, what about thinking on a correct concordant example that product is related to impermanent? Why isn't that enough to know the forward pervasion? If it's not enough to know the forward pervasion, what part of the definition doesn't it fulfill? If it is enough to know the forward pervasion, then how is the counter pervasion suddenly kicking in? That's the issue over here. Okay? Yeah? So if you can figure this out, then you can come to a point where you say the 2 modes is not a correct sign, because even if you don't say the 3 modes and you're only thinking of the 2, the 3 are always there. So there is no need to not talk about 3. But you have to explain why the third has to be reasoned out. So why do you need a correct discordant example? Why do you need to do all of this stuff? Until you can explain this, there is a legitimate doubt which is saying, why do I have to think about both sides and do all of this complicated jazz? Right? That's the issue.
It's like they're supporting each other.
Yeah, but you have to explain, justify the support, right? You understand the point? You have to justify the support. So even Gen says, because Dharma Kirti says so. And then Gen says, for example, a mother, that example that I was giving my good uncle and the not so good for nothing uncle. So Gen gives the same example. For instance, when a mother is trying to tell her children to be good, she uses 2 different examples without which, but that's still an example, you still need to justify it, right? So that's what you need to figure out. If you can do this in Tarig, it's great. Okay? Now, the Khamnyam Samashit, the 4 valid cognizers that are mutually inclusive. Just write these down. It will be helpful when you will be debating later. Did any of you write them down when we were doing Tarig?
Last time we did.
You did? Do you remember this? Cheba mitaba kona lang yedet sama. Cheba mitaba dan jawa. Cheba lang tapa shidu meba. Cheba mitaba imba. Cheba tapa to. Oh yeah. So that's okay here. So they're going to be the valid cognizers that realize. They'll all start with this. Okay. So you don't have to write each time the valid cognizer that realizes. Okay. So the valid cognizer that realizes. Then these are the things that are mutually inclusive. Product is impermanent. Product is empty of permanent. Product is related to impermanent. Product and permanent don't have a common locus. I'll start again. Product is impermanent. Product is impermanent. Product is empty of permanent. Product is related to impermanent. Yeah? Product and permanent don't have a common locus. And product is only impermanent. These 5 are mutually inclusive on one side. Yeah? Okay? Product is only impermanent. Okay, these are mutually inclusive. Got it? Now the opposite set also has to be written down. So you can write these 5 are mutually inclusive. And now on the other side, do the other side. Permanent, so it's the same thing. Permanent is not produced. Permanent is empty of product. Permanent is related to non-product. Permanent and product don't have a common locus. And permanent is only non-product. These 5 valid cognizers are all mutually inclusive with each other, not with like this. Yeah? Okay?
Can you see the other side?
The other ones are the same, you can extrapolate. So permanent is not produced. Permanent is only not produced. Permanent and produced don't. You can just extrapolate. It's the same thing. It will always be the same. Yeah?
Was the 5-1 product is only impermanent?
The last one.
Product is only impermanent. Yeah. Okay? So, when you realize that product is impermanent, you realize that it is only impermanent. It doesn't have a common locus with permanent. It is related to permanent. It is empty of permanent. You have to say all of these things, right? So then you've done all of this. You've realized all these things. Why can't you generate inference? Why do you have to do those other 5? Or if you start with those 5, why do you need these 5? Why isn't it enough to generate inference? Yeah?
In
Just
our
to be clear,
debate-
the same is the first 5 are mutually
Inclusive with each other,
Yeah,
and the
second
other 5 are
also
mutually inclusive with each other, not with the 10. Not 10, yeah. They're called kyamnyam sema, which means kyamnyam is mutually pervasive. But yeah. Okay?
In the morning debate when we practiced, I came to the conclusion that we don't need
The counter pervasion.
So
But when you know the forward pervasion, you already know the counter pervasion.
Yes.
That's what the text says. So sound like there's something extra that you do. Yeah?
you have to be able to put all those.
Somehow they all just happen and they happen simultaneously. So in Tibetan, actually, you speak of them together. So you don't say, in Tibetan you do say Jekhyap for forward pervasion and Dokhyap for counter pervasion. But you also refer to them as Jesu Drodoki Khyapa, which is talking about one thing. So when you do Pramana later, suddenly you won't hear Jekhyap and Dokhyap as more, you'll hear Jesu Drodoki Khyapa. So it sounds like one pervasion that is both. Yeah? And it's because they're implicit and explicit. So this, if you make sense of this, then you're good. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
With regards to the solution to this doubt, can you give us a clue?
Great.
I don't know.
No, and also to say that the first 5 are
Inclusive.
inclusive, and the latter 5 are inclusive, but the groups of 5 are
Are not inclusive with each other. That's also tricky.
Yeah, so that's very
There's a reason why.
yeah.
There's a very cool reason. Do you want to just hear this? But then it's very nice. What is it? Cheba Cheche. Yeah, it's very cool. If you say that all of these 10 are mutually inclusive, Kelsar Rinpoche has one nice thing that he does. He says, take the sign momentary in the proof that product is impermanent. It's a correct sign? Yes? Okay, first wrap your heads around it. You're very clueless.
Say that again, sorry.
Take the sign momentary in the proof that sound is that product is impermanent.
Is that a correct sign?
Why, bhai?
Because
Okay,
there's
fine.
no
Functional
proper
thing.
subject.
Fine. Functional thing. Take functional thing in the proof that product is impermanent. It follows it as a correct sign. Follows it as a correct sign in the proof that product is impermanent. It follows it as a correct sign in the proof that permanent is not produced. It follows it as a correct sign in the proof that permanent is not produced because the inferential valid cognizer that realizes the thesis realizes that permanent is not produced. If these 10 were mutually inclusive. Do you get it? It's very twisted. Do you get it? I'll tell you till you get it. Who hasn't got it? Okay. Take the sign functional thing in the proof that product is impermanent. Yeah? Got these 3? Product, impermanent, functional thing. It follows it as a correct sign in the proof that product is impermanent.
Agree.
It follows that the inferential valid cognizer that arises because of this sign realizes the thesis.
Agree.
It follows it is the inferential valid cognizer that realizes product is impermanent.
Agree.
And therefore it is the inferential valid cognizer that realizes product is empty of permanent, product is related to a permanent, product and permanent don't have a common locus because of those 5. Now if all 10 were mutually inclusive, it follows it also realizes that permanent is not produced. That's the inferential valid cognizer. So take the sign functional thing in the proof that product is impermanent. It follows it is a correct sign that proves that permanent is not produced. It follows it is the property of the subject in the proof that permanent is not produced. Because it is a correct sign in the proof that permanent is not produced. It follows it is a correct sign in the it follows it is a correct sign in the proof that permanent is not produced because it generates the valid inferential valid cognizer that realizes permanent is not produced.
No provision.
It follows it generates that inferential valid cognizer. It follows that inferential valid cognizer is produced in dependence on a correct sign. It follows it is a correct sign that proves that permanent is not produced. Because it realizes that permanent is not produced in dependence on a correct sign. If its thesis is a hidden phenomenon, then the correct sign has to prove the thesis. If the thesis is permanent is not produced, the correct sign has to prove permanent is not produced. That's why I was telling you the other day, and that's also what I was telling you. You can't realize that permanent and product don't have a common locus on something that is produced. It has to be on something permanent.
So that's the reason you need a counter provision.
That's why you need a discordant example.
Yeah.
That's why you need a discordant example. Because if you don't know this, you can't have the inference. But if you have inference, you have to know this. To know this, you can't know it on something produced. Otherwise, this will become a correct sign. And it will become the property of the subject, therefore it will exist on permanent. Everything will collapse. That's all Getzer-Lewis says. So it's like you have to do some mental acrobatics, but that's what it is. Okay? You asked, I told. But the important one is, why are these 10 not mutually inclusive? That's the reason that the text says. Yeah? Okay? Bye. Yes.
But which one was
The 5.
Chepa mitapakona is
So there's 5 in Tibetan. It's Chepa mitapa ngebetsema, Chepa tapto ngebetsema, Chepa mitapa kona la yobar ngebetsema, Chepa mitapa dan delwa ngebetsema, Chepa dan tape shidim meba ngebetsema. These 5 are mutually inclusive. Yeah? So mitapa kona is only impermanent. No? Yeah? Okay. Bye.
You expect us to read?
No, I'm saying bye to the subject.